many businesses don't realize what lead nurture really looks like and what a well-oiled kind of sales machine looks like. And, everyone likes to talk about leads, for good reason, but the lead nurture part is often forgotten about, and then they don't get sales. And then the problem is always that the leads weren't any good. Welcome back to the first episode of the Money Medicine podcast, where today we're going to be talking about increasing your attention, monetizing that newfound attention on your business, and keeping those new patients, those new customers coming back to your medical practice. As always, I'm joined by Logan Morse. Logan, how's your day today, man?
It was good. I shaved off my beard, went with the mustache. So
I was going to say, if you're watching on YouTube and you're taking a look at the screen, it's Sergeant Logan today. There's a new sheriff in town, as they say.
That's right. Yeah, no, trying a new look. As you probably heard on other episodes, I try new things, and this is what I ended up on today. So
I was going to say, I think it's all better than the buzz cut, which I know is out of your control, but I think even with the stash, it's a good look for you. But we won't spend too much time talking about cosmetics. Today we're going to be talking about lead nurture. Which again is a grumpy subject, maybe a subject that I think is necessary. That's the reason we're doing a podcast about it. But I think many businesses don't realize what lead nurture really looks like and what a well-oiled kind of sales machine looks like. And everyone likes to talk about leads, for good reason, but the lead nurture part is often forgotten about, and then they don't get sales. And then the problem is always that the leads weren't any good. And so I can't think of someone better to speak on behalf of especially pharmacies than Logan. So Logan, I'm going to kind of turn it over to you and do a little bit of Q&A with you on the subject of lead nurture.
All right.
Sweet. So giving a little bit of context for those of you guys listening, we're doing a number of different lead gen campaigns. Logan's been working with Growth Farm for years now. So he's been through the ringer and has watched a lot of videos and kind of personal development stuff, especially as it pertains to sales. So maybe this is more of like second nature, or you just have heard it from so many people besides me. You've followed it and obviously executed. But talk a little bit about what you're doing now with some of the leads that you're generating, and then I'll kind of go back and forth with you a little bit on terms of like lead nurture do's and lead nurture don'ts. Does that work?
Sounds good. I think probably the first thing, Chris, too, to start off with is just kind of give the people out there, what is a lead nurture? Like, what do you mean by lead nurturing?
Yeah, that's a great point. That's why you're on the podcast. So lead nurture is essentially the time between when a prospect shows interest and when you actually have the conversation. So how quickly, or essentially what does the process look like between someone fills out a form on your website, they fill out a form on your maybe somewhere on your social media, accounts. Maybe they send you a direct message, they send you an email. Like, how quickly does it go from they submit a form to a conversation, and then what activity or kind of like, again, nurture, what goes on during that period before you actually have the phone call? So that is lead nurture kind of in a nutshell, is those different, the time, but then also the activity in between. So is that a good description?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay, cool. So like I said, we're running some lead gen campaigns. Logan's getting some leads. We're also running the same lead gen campaigns for some other pharmacies, but we're getting massively different results. And I'll let Logan kind of speak to what he's different and why he's seeing such different results. So Logan, a lead comes across. I'd say the typical pharmacy would be, all right, great, we got the lead. We'll contact within 24 hours, right? 24 business hours, ideally. What does it look like when you're getting a lead right now?
So right now, because I'm crazy, I set all of my devices to notifications. And so constantly throughout the day, I hear like pings and things of that nature. And so I'm watching for these leads to come in. So that's kind of like the first step is always be paying attention to those leads. So the moment that you get one, that's when you need to start focusing on them, because you have their attention. And they're most likely, no matter if they're texting you, emailing you, calling you, whatever the way that the lead comes in, that's when you have their attention the most, right? Just like if you were to go shopping and someone comes up to you in the mall and says, "Hey, sir, what are you looking for?" Right now, they know that they have your attention because you're there shopping versus if you were somewhere else, right? So as soon as I get that ping, I look at what they're coming across for. So is it an X campaign, a Y campaign, whatever the campaign is, and then immediately follow up. Hey, Susie. Hey, Billy. Saw that you just signed up for XYZ. How can I help you with this process? Or just let me get you set up with that. Here's the form to fill out, and then reach back out to me once that's done. And then almost instantly, I'm doing that within 5 minutes, regardless if it's 11 o'clock at night or 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. Generally, I don't get too many at 4 or 5 o'clock, thank the Lord. But whenever that ping comes through, they're getting an almost instant response.
Yeah. Okay. So back up a little bit because I also want to make sure that the outcome is expressed so that you have a reason to pay attention, a reason to take notes. Talk a little bit about maybe over the past 30, 45, 60 days, how many leads you've gotten. And this is specifically for some kind of telehealth stuff, but how many leads you've gotten. You don't need to get into, I guess, details beyond that, but how many leads you've gotten. And then again, how many of those leads you've been able to convert for a telehealth visit.
Sure. So the last probably 35 days, we've had about 65 leads come in. Out of those 65 leads, about 57 of them have converted fully. So only 8 people who I messaged did not complete the process. And so then from there, it's just follow up and hopefully eventually you get them across the line. But it's more than likely after this point, they won't cross the line. Yeah.
So basically 57 divided by 60, that's got to be some number close to, 85, 90%,
right.
Which is a pretty high conversion rate. So these are, again, new patients, never talked to them before, not existing patients that like, know, and trust you. These are straight up cold people, never heard of your pharmacy before, correct?
100%. I would say almost 99% of them are not from the state of Michigan.
Okay. So again, no experience, no reason to be an easy conversion for you, right?
Correct.
So of the 57 that you've converted, and you're obviously having that conversation, you're reaching out, you're getting them the information that they need in a short amount of time. How does that 57 and that process, like how many of those were just like easy conversions? You sent them the information so quickly that they were able to, take that next step. And how many of them were you like, making phone calls, making texts? Like what was that kind of like follow-up process look like to try to get them to convert?
I would say a majority of them, it was just super simple. I sent them the information. They were super glad to get it really quickly. Most of them were like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for reaching out right away. They completed their stuff. Only maybe a handful I had to follow up with like an additional email. And most of the time I try to do the same style that they reached out to me. But a couple of them I did call and just say, hey, I sent the link. I don't know if you saw it or not. And that's the way I always come across it. Like, hey, I didn't know if you saw what I sent you, because a lot of times people will open it and then they read it and then they close it. And then I think maybe one or two, after the phone call, I texted them and just said, hey, got your number from the email that you sent me about XYZ. I just wanted to follow up, make sure everything was all good, or see kind of like what's going on, why you haven't, finished your follow up.
Yeah. So of the 8 that didn't convert, why do you think that they didn't convert, right? Were there any differences in the activity that you did, the response times, or is it just, hey, just numbers, you're not going to convert them all?
I'm going to attribute most of it to response time. So this weekend I kind of got lazy, and Saturday I got some leads come in and I was just like, I'll deal with it tomorrow. And then Sunday night, I responded to them, sent them the message, and almost none of those individuals completed the form that they needed to fill out through the telehealth. And so it was just kind of like a shame on me, Logan, for not following through and like actually doing the work. I mean, and it's boring work, but it's just like work you have to do, especially if you want to convert. And then some of them, there were some issues on the telehealth side as far as like the way that their emails come across can kind of look weird, but the majority of them were my fault of just not doing the work and being quick. And I think that makes a big difference.
So what's worse, in your opinion, having the notifications and having the quick responses and having to be on it, or following up with people?
I think the following up with them is more annoying, even though it's like distracting, especially if you have like kids and a family at home, and it can be disruptive to that kind of stuff. But it's so much easier to just take care of it then, and it's one less thing that you have on your plate, especially if you're just doing it electronically. It only takes a few seconds, especially, a lot of the responses are very similar. So I've gotten to the point where I can just copy and paste certain things in there, just add their name. And then if I need to add anything like personalized to it, then I'll add that. But it makes the process really quick and I just can be done with it. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. So obviously I have the context, so I know that plenty of these had to be pushed to other pharmacies in other states just because of the proximity and the location of the lead.
Right.
But if you had to guess, based on the 57 or so that went through the telehealth service and then their associated scripts and what that gross margin, gross profit would look like for the pharmacies, if all of those came to your pharmacy, is there a number maybe that you could put on?
It'd probably be like $50 margin per script.
So about an extra $2,500 in gross profit.
Yep.
So perfect example, again, because I kind of referenced it at the beginning of the call. Now, not all of this is the same exact things that we're doing with other pharmacies, but you being on the ball, you being responsive, resulted in an extra $2,500 in gross profit this month, right? And if you weren't as responsive, that number 8 of, that didn't convert probably looks more like 48. And you convert, you convert a handful and you miss out on an extra $2,000 to your bottom. The lead's exactly the same. The only difference was the pharmacy's lead nurture in response time.
Absolutely. Yep. And what's funny is I just got a lead right now. So it's one of those things where
do you want to take a pause? Yeah. Do you want to do it while we're on the podcast? I can do a 2-minute rant.
No. I'll respond to them here in a second. But that's the kind of thing. It's just like, I know that I have a lead now. I'll take care of it as soon as we're done with the podcast. And I almost guarantee as long as I do it before like 10:30, 11 o'clock, more than likely they're going to convert. But I think after that kind of like 2-hour window, that's kind of where it gets squirrely because, right, they've already left the source wherever they message from. Or they could be doing something. They could be working out or going on a run or whatever they do. They just lost that attention. And so, it's always kind of funny.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's the exact same thing, but it kind of reminds me, to use a funny example in a personal life, like, my fiance, she loves to get late night snacks. That's kind of her thing. She's a sweet tooth for sure. And I can't tell you how many times, like 8 o'clock, she'll say something like, oh, we should get X, we should get a cookie, we should get a Kit Kat bar, or, whatever it is. And within the course of an hour and a half, she might either talk herself out of it, A, or B, just kind of like lose interest in that subject and it no longer like sounds good. And again, if right in that moment I was like, yep, here, I'll give you that. And immediately I gave her the ice cream or immediately I gave her the Kit Kat bar, like she would start eating it. But it's that time delay from like showing interest to by the time she can actually get the object, that the interest can wane, that the distractions can mount, that her attention can go elsewhere. And so again, it's not that she didn't want the sweet at 8 o'clock. She did, but because it took long for her to get it, maybe you went and you checked Uber Eats or you checked DoorDash and it was a long wait time, or you had to drive across town. Like the effort of and the time delay to get the object was the difference between you getting it and there being a sale and you not, right? And it's just that friction, right? I think people forget that, like, if I'm available at 8 p.m. and I submit a lead form, through your pharmacy and I want help, like I might have some downtime. That might be easy for me to knock that out if you got the information back to me. But tomorrow, 8 a.m., I might have a full day at work, and I might have kids in the evening, and then I might, have a tough day at work, so I just don't want to do anything. I forget about it, etc. And again, same lead, same opportunity, but because of that response time, they don't convert, and your business misses out, and they go elsewhere, or they just sit on their hands and they don't do anything at all.
Right. Yep. Yeah, and I would say most of the time they're going to find that source. They're going to find somebody else who can provide that for them faster. And I think about things like DoorDash and Instacart, where you don't go to the store anymore because you can get that response. You just tell them what you want and you get it right away. So a very similar experience in a different realm. But yeah, everyone loves things quick.
Yeah, I've heard this before. It's not my idea by any means, but if you just took anything in life, and you did it twice as fast as your competitor or half the amount of time, right? Said another way, like that in itself would be valuable, like massively valuable. There's no instance in life where it'd be like, yeah, I'd want to get there in a shorter amount of time. Like imagine if flights took half the time. Like I paid double for a flight that got me, I don't know, Austin to, I don't know, not that I would go there, but like Austin to London in half the time. I might pay double the price. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
there's so many examples where speed is, super valuable and might literally just be the difference, the differentiator between the best, in that niche and the second best. They have the same service, they have the same app, they have the same whatever. But if you can get it 15 minutes faster on DoorDash than you will on Uber Eats, you're going to order on DoorDash.
Right. No, I would agree with that. I think too, to that point, Chris, is what source would you say is best to follow up with those leads? So, we've got like email, texting, phone calls. What are you seeing in the marketing realm that's really a higher success rate?
Yeah, great question. I think you deserve credit in the sense of like you are reaching out how they reached out to you. So I think that's like a clever kind of thing. I would say in terms of conversion rate, like email is great. All right, it's people are pretty willing to give up their email. So like that's a great way to follow up with people. That said, people get so many emails, and I think we can all think of times where we just like bulk deleted emails, right? So email is great to collect. I'd still build your email list, but it's not as good as second best, which in my opinion would be texting or a phone call. You can kind of go either way because they're pros or cons. But everyone can think of a text that they get. You don't forget a text, right? Like you always get them. You might open it and then forget to respond to it, but like the open rate of a text message is like 100%, right? Email open rates are like, I don't know, 10% maybe if you have like a super engaged list, right? 20%. For some people, it's 2-3%. So if you are getting their cell phone, and if you can automate it even better, like sending them a quick text message of like, hey, just got your form filled, like going to be taking care of this and sending over the information that you need in a couple of minutes. Like as long as you can hold up that end of the bargain, texting is amazing. Obviously, you don't want to promise anything in your text that you can't actually execute on. And then phone call is great as well. But I'd probably say in reality, it would be email would be probably third. Phone call would be second because phone call and having their cell phone number is valuable. You can leave voicemails, you can reach out a lot. And then texting is just so good because everyone, again, can respond to a quick text. They're at work, they're busy, they might even be in the bathroom at work, right? They can respond to a text. So if you aren't already, I would try to collect phone numbers because it'll make lead nurture possible with phone calls and text, kind of pick your poison. But I think, again, if they're reaching out to you via email and you get that quick notification like you have been, and you respond via email in 3 minutes, 5 minutes, you don't need their cell phone. You don't need to text them. You know what I mean? So that would be my opinion on it. I guess, what have you seen? How are most people reaching out to you now? Is it via email, right?
Right now, through my telehealth stuff, that's all email. Because that's what I provided them. I didn't give them I gave them a phone number, but I told them like the primary way to reach out to me is via email. And that's because like I'll check it all the time. Whereas if they call the store number after hours, like they're going to have to leave a message and then I'll have to reach back out. It's just, for them, it's more access to me, which is a pro and a con for a lot of different reasons. But for me, for the most part, it's way faster for me to respond to them. So they get a little bit more access that way too. Yeah.
And I guess flipping the question around to you, you would have to say probably texting is number one, phone calls number two, and emails number three, right? Just because from your experience at the pharmacy, we've taken a lot of things that you used to do phone calls for. Now you do text. And I guess with your experience in texting patients for a variety of different things, your responses are pretty good, right? Like how often do you really have to call people versus just having them quickly respond to a text?
Yeah, texting is way easier. I mean, it's just faster. Instead of me calling 100 people and spending, 10, 15 minutes or getting stuck. I mean, we all run into like chatty Cathys and people who want to talk forever. And like most of us don't want to be rude and be like, hey, sorry, Sally, I don't have time to talk to you. See ya.
Yeah.
You could be stuck on the line for 45 minutes. Whereas with a text, like the conversation ends as soon as you send the message. And so you can get the point across, whatever you're trying to do, especially like for us, we do a lot of refill reminders. And so I'll get 100. Yep, go ahead and refill that, and I'm just done. The conversation's done. It took all of 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So the speed of which I can convert a lot of different things is just significantly faster for pennies to send a text. So it's for sure the way to go.
Yeah. Now, with the texting, again, I don't know if you touched on it, but from the phone calls, or I guess one of the benefits of texting, I guess where I was going to go is like so many things in life, you don't need a phone call, right? It's kind of similar to like with working right now. Like there's a lot of people, especially in the remote space, that gripe about like, man, Zoom call. Did it require a Zoom call? Or could we have just had a quick Slack message or a quick text message and avoided that meeting, right? We can all think of meetings that were unnecessary, whether it's in person or Zoom. I think a lot of that can be done in the pharmacy, or it can be said about that in the pharmacy space too, where it's like, did I really need to call this person? Or did I just need a quick yes or no response?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like some things warrant a phone call for sure, but I think there's so many things that don't. And if you call everyone instead of texting, you're just going to lose out on so much productivity. And you might find that your patients would just prefer a text versus they get a voicemail because they couldn't answer the original phone call. Then they call you, then they get put on hold, and then they finally get a hold of you just to have a 15-second conversation, right? That could have been done over text. So, yeah, all that to say, I think texting is for sure the best. But phone call is great too, so that you can obviously leave voicemails and stuff like that. And, maybe some conversations are best to be had over the phone versus texting.
Now, do you think for like our pharmacy, for instance, we just get a lot of phone calls, and it's a lot of times just, refills and, they just want to get a supplement sent back to them. What are your thoughts on training patients to utilize some of those other services like texting? Like, how would you implement that? Or like, what are your thoughts along that of like getting them comfortable with just texting the pharmacy themselves? Or
yeah, I think you definitely have to train your customer. I don't think you can just like put something up on your website. I mean, maybe you could have something with your in kind of your wait message where you could kind of say, hey, did you know we have texting? Like, I think sometimes that can be somewhat effective with different kind of messages versus like piano music or something like that. I think that's probably the most annoying option. But I think the way I would have it with a patient is if you're on the phone with them and they clearly contacted you about something that could have been exchanged over text, I would say, hey, Dorothy, like, I'm so glad that you called. It was great to talk to you today. That said, have I told you about our texting? And no, I've never heard of it. Well, let me ask you, how long did you have to wait to get on the phone with me today? Were you kind of waiting? We're pretty busy at the pharmacy. Did it take 5-10 minutes? Yeah, I was on hold for 5-10 minutes. Awesome. Well, I don't want you to have to wait on 5 to 10 minutes if you don't have to, Dorothy. If you ever need to call me, you absolutely do it. But for simple stuff like this, you can actually text our number at and if it obviously matches your main phone line, awesome. If it's a different number, awesome. And then what I would do is I would say, hey, Dorothy, I'm sure you probably have some questions about maybe how it works. Why don't I go ahead and send you a text right now? You obviously have your cell phone on you, right? Can you put it on speaker so that you can check and see if you get a text? Awesome. Okay, I'm going to text you right now. Then, if you obviously have texting capabilities, go into your software, shout out Mize, and send them a quick message that just says like, hi, Dorothy, I'm on the phone with you right now. You can text me anytime from this number and the pharmacy will receive it, right? And then that way, you've now introduced texting. So again, I think it's something that you have to work patients into. And you could also send probably a bulk text out to your patients if you have their contact information and just say like, hey, this is so-and-so from the pharmacy. We're implementing a new texting, strategy. If you ever have simple questions that you want to ask the pharmacy that you don't feel like really need a phone call and we can give you a quick answer, go ahead and text us here. And if we need to, we'll call you to get a hold of you, right? I think you could probably do a combination of things. But I think human behavior is something that needs to be considered, right? I think there's plenty of things in life with technology advancements, etc., where like something comes out and you're like, oh my gosh, like this is the greatest thing, like, it's going to take over the world. And then we forget how much human behavior has an impact on how quickly we like adopt new things, right? Perfect example would be like Alexa. When Alexa came out and everyone was like, oh my gosh, they saw the first commercial. It's like, I'm just going to tell Alexa to order me my toothpaste on Amazon. Like everyone thought that was going to happen. And then how many years down the road are we? And like very few people use her like that. Like maybe it's Alexa, turn on the lights, but she definitely didn't take over the world. So I think similarly with like things in pharmacy, texting, etc., you definitely have to like teach your customers how to do things, teach your patients how to do things. Because otherwise they're just going to like fall into those same habits that they have. But you can absolutely do it. And I think you guys have obviously done a pretty good job of getting people more familiar with texting and more comfortable, obviously just responding back via quick text versus phone calls. And I guess a follow-up question to that would be, how many times have you texted someone and they're like, hey, I'd rather talk about this on the phone? Hey, or how many times have you gotten a phone call from from a patient that said, hey, I got your text, but I kind of wish you guys called me, right? Like, do most people just like, are they happy to do texting?
Oh yeah. I don't know anyone that's ever said, I'd rather, next time call me. There are a few occasions where someone calls right after they get a text, but almost no one has ever said, I don't want you to text me. I just want you to call me or just send me an email. Like, it never happens.
Yeah. Well, think about it like just in everyday life. Like, how many times have you gotten like a phone call from like a friend of a friend, or like, maybe a past friend, or maybe even family at certain points in time where it's like, man, do I really want to answer the phone right now? And you just give them that quick message response like, hey, I'm busy right now. Like, what's up? Right? Like, we internally, even for people we like opt for texting, let alone like, no offense, your pharmacy calls you, your doctor calls you, etc. Like, obviously sometimes you're like, all right, I should probably take this. But how many times are you like, man, I know what they're calling about. It's a refill. Like, yes, I want the script. Like, man, I wish they'd just text me.
Right. And it's a lot less painful. I think that's a big key there. Is it's sometimes painful to get on the phone and then have to tell someone, no, I can't do X, Y, Z. You can take it's a lot easier to say no over a text than it is over on a phone. And I think that's a big portion of it too.
Well, let me ask this. So that's like maybe a potential downside that I don't want to be, ignorant of. Would you say that when you text people, it's like a part A, part B, and I love long questions, as you know, but when you would call people, do you feel like there were times where people would say like, nope, I don't want to refill that, and you kind of had an opportunity to be like, well, why, or we think you should, and kind of like massage them into a yes? Like, A, did you used to do that? And then B, if you used to do that, do you feel like since you switched to texting, you're getting less refills? Or do you feel like you're getting more or the same or less? Like, kind of speak on that, because I don't want you to text. It's a time efficiency, but you lose out on scripts.
Right. I would say that more often than not, it's more beneficial to text, because then individuals are more cognizant of like, oh yeah, I didn't think about this, but when I did take my progesterone today, I only had 7. I should get it refilled. Like, thanks for the reminder. Whereas like with a phone call, one, you have to be lucky enough to catch them when they actually answer, and not have to play phone tag. And then 2, a lot of times they're busy and then they're like, I don't know, blah, blah, I can't like deal with this right now. I'll let you know, like I'll send it in later. Yeah. And so you kind of it's just more convenient. It's less of an annoyance because they can respond back whenever they want, versus when you call, you're stuck to whatever time you call. And that's when they have to answer.
Well, I think too, like if there was pushback, or if you just said like, hey man, like, yeah, we actually are getting less scripts. I think if you texted and you got your easy yeses really quickly, right? Let's say you texted people, and when you call the list of 100 people, typically you get 70 yeses on refills. and now you're texting and you're getting 60. I would argue that because you're doing the texting and it's all automated, those 40 people that said no via text, that used to be 30 over phone calls, you now have time to call them and say, hey, Jeremy, I got your text. I know that you said no. Just wanted to call and verify, like, is your medication working well for you? Are there issues? Like, you know, if you don't mind me asking, is there anything that I can do to help, or any reason why you said no? Right? That you're comfortable sharing, or something to that effect. Like, I think if you even were getting a lower conversion rate via text, which I don't think you are, you're kind of speaking to, you'd have more time to call those people that are telling you no, versus if you have to call a list of 100 people. Like, it's tough to get through that list in the first place, and you might kind of feel rushed because you're like, oh my gosh, I have 84 to go. Like, I can't really try to like talk to this patient that much longer.
Right. And the other nice thing about at least with a text is when they do say no, at least what we do is we follow up with, hey, no problem, Susie. When will you be running out? So that way we can set it up on an autofill for you. So that way you don't have to let us know when you need it. We'll just do the work for you. And so then they're like, well, I have like 10 days left. Cool. We'll set it up. It will fill in the next 5 days. And then we'll go from there. We'll give you a jingle. And they're like, oh, okay, cool. Great. Thanks. So even though they said no, we finally got them to say yes by following up with, well, when do you want it filled?
Yeah.
And so, because that takes off the pressure of like, oh, I don't want it right now because I can't afford it, or it takes out all of like the money kind of complaints where it's like, oh, I have to wait for my paycheck, XYZ. And then we have notes on all of our patients, like what supplements that they take. So I just say, and by the way, do you want us to add your CoQ10, your bergamot, your probiotic, whatever it happens to be? And then we just wait for the next yes and kind of go until we get like a final no. And once we get like the final no on everything, they're like, cool, we'll get this all set for you. It seems to be a pretty good strategy right now for us. And it has decreased a lot of the workload. It's just trying to convert the rest of the patients over to that.
Yeah, that makes sense. So won't beat you guys over the head with this message, but I think if we had to put it into bullet points, Logan, don't make sure I don't miss any, but it would be respond as quickly as you can.
Yep. Follow
up as much as kind of needed. There's plenty of sales statistics that you can take a look at that show that, again, many conversions after the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th point of contact. So that could be an email, that could be a text, a phone call, a voicemail, a follow-up text, a follow-up email. It might take some work, right? I can think of plenty of things in life where I was interested. It just took some follow-up because I was just busy. And in reality, this could be low on someone's totem pole. Doesn't mean they're not interested, but they just have other things ahead of them. So don't be afraid to be diligent. And then obviously when you do get their interest and they do respond, execute quickly, right? So if it does take a little bit of follow-up, if it does take a little bit of lead nurture to get them to do what they need to do on their end, then be very responsive, be very quick in executing on your end so that, whether that means a purchase, getting their scripts ready, etc. No one wants to be followed up with, then get you what you need, and then they wait again, right? They want it now quickly, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Would you say that those are the bullet points, those are the tricks of the trade?
I would agree 100%.
Cool. Sweet. Well, that is the first ever, not the last, obviously. And obviously, if you've been listening to previous episodes, we did our kind of name change transition. But that was the first episode of the Money Medicine Podcast. Again, we're going to be talking about all things getting more attention, all things monetizing that attention, and then all things keeping those customers, because you can build a much bigger business if you have high retention rates. So appreciate you guys listening. Make sure to tune in for other episodes. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. And again, we'll be bringing on guests here in the near future, but we'll obviously pop in a lot with episodes like this where we're doing something, we're getting results, and we want to share those best practices with you guys. Thanks for listening.